Today we're going to rank the artifacts in Call of Dragons, and this is going to be based off of not only my experience using some of the very best artifacts in the game, but also we're going to tap into the experience of dozens of other people from my alliance so that we've covered literally every single artifact and talked to people who've used it, and we really know the pros and cons. So stick around in this video for the tier list ranking the best artifacts in Call of Dragons. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Call of Dragons. And the artifact aspect of the game is just very fun. Look, they're fun to collect and they're fun to use, but most importantly, some are better than others. So we're going to rank them from S tier all the way down to, hey, this is utility or a non-legendary. And this is primarily just a legendary tier list, but I want to include some utility-based non-legendary artifacts to talk about how you use them and why they actually can be very cool. So let's get started with the S tier artifacts, the ones that I think are probably the best of the best, because that's what you want to hear first, right? Get the hype going. And one of the best artifacts in the game has to be the Infernal Flame. This thing is crazy single target damage. You can really punish someone that you really want to stick it to them. When you activate this thing, it does big damage to the single target. It doesn't have a template that can be unwieldy and difficult to use when you're in the open field. You just snap the button and you're doing more damage. The only downside here is that people often run away and they can just walk away from you before you start doing any of the damage to them. And I've had that happen to me. It happens to the best of us where, man, you fire off the Infernal Flame and it actually just walked away from all your ticks. GG. That is a 7.5% artifact, by the way. So if you max out all its skills and its star level, you get 7.5% attack and defense, which is super, super powerful. Up next, are the legendary S tier. I mean, these are the best of the best. I do need to include the Dragon Scale Armor. In my estimation, the role of your infantry is to soak damage, and nothing soaks damage better than the Dragon Scale Armor. It's got a passive ability that makes it so that you reduce the damage you take from ranged units, which is just really good. I think this is squarely in alignment with what infantry are designed to do. Although, let me take a little detour while we're here and talk about the Greymar's Warhammer. This thing does insane damage. It has a huge radius in which you can do that damage. I don't think it's as good as the Dragon Scale Armor, because what you're really supposed to do with infantry in most situations is soak damage. And if you're getting hit by a ton of stuff, the 18% mitigation of ranged damage is nutty. But the Greymar's Warhammer is the artifact I regret not having the most, for sure. I don't have enough infantry to actually be running it anyways, but like one day I would like to have a really high skill Greymar's Warhammer. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe new infantry will come out first and I'll be using other stuff between now and then. But I would say that is the second best infantry item. Okay. From here, let's go back to the S tier. And in the S tier, we've got to include the insane Rattle Spear. This thing is mental. It's easy-ish to use in combat. I mean, I guess at times it's a little annoying. When you activate it, you've got like a little window that you kind of target within a broader window of sort of range. You'll do damage over the course of 6 seconds. But most importantly, it's got a passive that when you inflict the defense break, you get an additional like 20% defense penetration. It's so good. It's so, so good. 10 out of 10. One of the strongest artifacts in the game, if not the strongest, quite frankly, because you could use it for rallies and it still gives great benefits. And you can also use it in the field. So good. Now from here, we got to talk about the Spring Blades, baby. If you use cavalry, and I actually don't on the ground, but I use my flying cavalry, this has got to be the best artifact for sure. It's the best cav artifact in the game. It's big damage. I don't think you can get bigger damage anywhere else for cavalry in an artifact. I love this thing. The only downside is that a lot of that damage is over time, and this sort of sends out some blades, they spin around, and then you can recall it. And that's just the key. If the enemy's going to walk away from the spinny, you just recall it, and you'll do your instant damage there as well. That's really good. So you can crank the damage. I love that thing. I don't think there is a better artifact for cavalry. So that gives you actually one artifact for each troop type that is, in my opinion, the very best. So this brings us to the next artifact. And I could see the justification for this being S tier, but I'm going to put it at A tier for now. But it's, I think, the best A tier artifact. It's the Phoenix Eye. I have a theory that this just actually drops less than the other legendary artifacts. I'm not really sure why. I just don't ever seem to get it. It's so good. I think there was an event where I could have gone for it in the Forge of Light, and I deeply regret having not gone for it. If I had it, I would be using it. And I wouldn't have gone for the Breath of Jargontis. The Breath of Jargontis is really good. It's a weird one, though. What this does, and that's not Breath of Jargontis, is it? I think this is the Breath of Jargontis. What the Breath of Jargontis does is applies a defense break to the enemy up to 32%. And that is very powerful. It's like 20 seconds of debuff hits 10 enemies. Now, the template is itty bitty. I mean, it is the smallest damn template, which is really unfortunate because like you're almost never going to hit 10 enemies. And what I've actually been finding is that it's less good for typical big brawls in the open field, and it's really good in statue fights, better than the Infernal Flame, because the enemies all cluster up and then you crack them with that, and it is so effective at melting enemies. My Alliance members were talking about how they apply the defense break from the Breath of Jargontis and then pop all their other artifacts to sort of do elevated damage. It is super powerful, and it is one of my, I think is one of the most powerful artifacts, but probably like actually the third best mage-based artifact, right? With the Infernal Flame, obviously you want that on Lilia, so if you're not spending, don't worry about it. Otherwise, the Phoenix Eye, then probably the Breath of Jargontis, in my opinion. There are some downsides and upsides with the Breath of Jargontis. The downside is that, you know what, at the end of the day, it's not damage. It's the potential for damage. So the enemy could just walk away and then you get nothing out of it, which I find that unlike other artifacts, which I just fire off when I can, Breath of Jargontis, I'm much more strategic in, do I use it now or do I use it later? The other thing that's really weird about it is that it's not changing in strength if you're T5 or T1. And the point I'm trying to make here is that theoretically this will be better on lower tier players, so T4s, because the effect that they're applying is just as strong as what a T5 could do. Whereas other artifacts that do more or less damage really change dramatically if you're a T5 player or not a T5 player. But the other thing that I like about the Breath of Jargontis, even as a T5 player that's using it, is that even if my March is super low health, I still apply a max effect of the Breath of Jargontis. Pretty cool. So I think it's an A tier artifact, third best for mages, which brings us to a couple good ones here for cavalry. Let's start there. The Kingslayer. I love the name on this thing, and I think the power level is amazing. I want to talk about the Sorlin's Blade now, which I'm going to put into B tier because I want to differentiate between them. The Kingslayer is just better damage. It just is. But I actually use the Sorlin's Blade. So wait, why would Chisgule use the Sorlin's Blade after he just finished saying Kingslayer is better? I have both of them at 4 skill levels. Well, the reason is that I actually march speed balance my flying cavalry. So now both my flying cavalry marches go at the same speed, and that is really handy when you travel long distances. And I have found flying cavalry to just freaking slay. People accuse me of being a farm slayer, but actually that's not true. I slay marches that are combat marches that are trying to go somewhere or trying to get home from somewhere. And like, get wrecked. It is so good. I don't use ground cavalry almost at all anymore. It's very weird. But for flying calves, as the Spring Wardens, I have loved using the Sorlin's Blade. I do think the Kingslayer, however, is better in the A tier, and that's where it belongs. Final artifact goes in the A tier is going to be the Shadow Blades, and I might actually have another one. Come to think of it, I think I do have another one that's going to be A tier. So the Shadow Blades do area of effect damage in front of you. Their range is very short, but you can hit up to 5 targets. Hoo-hoo. If you're in the mix with your marksman, it can be brutal. And the other thing that goes with it is the Viola's Bow, of course. The Viola's Bow has a silence effect. So it's just like the Shadow Blades, but less damage, but it silences your ability to use artifacts. I have had this hit me, and the benefit of that is less that it has stopped your enemy from using the artifact, and more actually that it is confusing to them They're like, what, is my game broken? Am I lagging? What's happening? No, you're just silenced by the Viola's Bow and you just didn't realize it. So I think Viola's Bow is a great pick for the A ranking, which leaves some weird ones in the B ranking. And you're going to be like, what are you doing putting the Gold Crest as a B? You're out of your mind. No, I'm not. I'm just having targeting issues. Let me explain. When I use the Gold Crest, and if you target someone at the edge of your range, two things can happen. First of all, you target them, but they're actually out of range. And so you click again and you're like, wait, why is my game not doing anything? Oh, wait, the template's still up because it didn't actually fire off the Gold Crest. So you go to close the template and then you go to target them again. Oh, you left combat, so you don't have rage anymore and you can't use your Gold Crest. This has happened to me more times than I can count. In addition, if you hit an enemy that's running from you, then what happens? Well, there's 2 damage triggers on the Gold Crest, and this artifact has Freygar synergy. What it does is big damage to a single target, but then it will do damage again if you have Freygar in the march and immobilize them. But it won't do that if they've run out of range. So I find this artifact does not, for me, fulfill its potential. When it's good, it's very good. But I find that often I'm in a situation where it's just not doing what I signed up for. So I'm going to put it at a B. It's a bummer, and it is what it is. Also at a B is a Fang of Ashkari. Think of the Fang of Ashkari as a worse Greymar's Warhammer. Same idea, but less damage, and it takes place over time, which is generally not a good thing. They could just walk away from it. But you have defense as your stats for that, which is pretty cool. Very happy with the design of this, and I honestly would like to start using it. This brings me to the Harp, which is amazing for city defense. It's not an open field item, but for city defense, it's damn good and might be the best artifact in the game because it's giving troop stats for all troop types. Now, that garrison artifact's really good, but this rally artifact is just a D. It's actually just bad. Often, if you're spender, you'd rather have the S tier artifacts for their passive abilities than the D tier Blood Blade banner, in my opinion. Could be wrong on that, but I feel pretty confident that that's where that belongs. Now, at this point, we've really kind of got a lot of clutter in here. So in order to reduce the clutter, let's just talk about some utility artifacts really quickly. Some of these are very straightforward, like I believe it's Lucius Horn, summons a resource node. Really love that thing. This artifact, which teleports you to a resource node, is actually worthless. It's really terrible. This is a cloak that does stealth, and people use that to burn structures while stealth, which is really weird that you can do that, but you can. The Springbird Feather, you can gain a lot of march speed. Very cool utility, but doesn't rank on the scale for combat, really. I've seen people who use lots of a certain troop type bring a Springbird Feather on their slowest march. They use that to propel all their marches away when they're getting ready to run. I think it's a good use of the Springbird Feather when you have tons of marches together. Also, dude, this epic artifact is so cool. The Magic Bomb, it makes it so that the target cannot enter a city or resource node for 8 seconds, and then they blow up and take damage and damage their friends. So cool. Love this thing. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Potion of Vigor. Okay. Super, super cool for building. Obviously, engineering boost when you activate it. The Spirit Bands is used to clear debuffs. Sometimes people bring this for behemoths because it hits like 10 things, which is amazing. Also, we've got to talk about the Taunt Mask for behemoth fights. That's really, really good. Very critical to control the aggression of the behemoth and who it's fighting. From here, the Freezing Ring. I think this is really cheesy, but what I've seen people do is they charge in, then use the Freezing Ring when everybody's targeting them, and people are not smart enough to realize that the target is invulnerable to damage for 10 seconds. It's like an ice block from World of Warcraft, okay? And yeah, they mitigate a ton of damage by using it. Otherwise, I think it's pretty bad. If you can trick people, which you probably can, you can do cool things with it. It's actually shocking just how cool it is. Pun not intended for it being a Freezing Ring. This is a Home Blossom. Teleports you back to your city. So you could go get a Mana Stone and then get yourself home. The Sickle will gather resources instantly. This is really good to save when you're in war and not use, so that when you need to clear a resource node to port people in to that location, you can sickle it. So good. Love that. In addition, this item is really not even supposed to be here, so I'm just going to drop it in here, and we'll pretend I didn't put it in this list of artifacts. I don't even remember what it does. It's not particularly consequential. Okay, so at this point, we've covered almost all the utility, but there is one or two more. This is the teleport staff. You can teleport your troops, which could be anywhere, onto your alliance's territory somewhere, as long as there is a allied troop that you can target. So you could be anywhere on the map in the same zone as somewhere you have territory and a friend that is a troop. You can teleport yourself and up to 5 other friends, I think. Maybe it's 4 other friends to the location of that other troop, which is, I mean, it's cute utility, okay? So now, oh, one last one. This is a peacekeeping damage boost. Nobody cares. Okay, so now we can talk about these C tier artifacts, and 2 of them that manipulate movement are the Wolf Woman of Healer and the Storm Arrows. And you would never fight with these all the time, which is why they go here in the C tier. The Storm Arrows are good for crossing terrain. The Wolf Woman of Healer is exploited currently to do that as well, and so in that regard, it is in some ways better. The Wolf Woman, you can basically go somewhere and then activate it again to warp back, or after 15 seconds, you warp back, unless you go reinforce a city or you walk into a resource node, in which case you won't get warped back. So it can function like a Storm Arrows. You just go into a resource node and you don't teleport back. Both of them are very powerful for navigating terrain, but again, there's no combat effect there, so you wouldn't want to use them all the time. I'm also going to drop, let's see here, these 2 infantry artifacts into the C tier. And at the end of the day, these both do damage and have attack. And like, I have used them. I get it. They're cool. You can do cool damage with your infantry. I like that. But at the end of the day, I think infantry are there to mitigate damage more than deal it. And most people can't afford to run infantry over and over and over because the march dies really fast and you don't get many merits. And it just is what it is, but it fulfills its role. So we're going to put that at the C tier. Decent damage, not what infantry are really there to do. Visage of the Sanctus is also going to go at this tier, the C tier. The reason is that, you know, look, you can shield an ally. That's cool. It does a small damage boost to your Thea. But where am I using Thea? Well, I'm using her for flyers. And what am I doing with my flyers? Well, I've got my Spring Blades. I've got my Sorlin's Blade. I'm trying to do damage. And often I'm trying to do that damage instantly. So I don't think that the sort of slow nature of the Visage of the Sanctus is really where I want to be. So I've got that as C. It's really specific to flyers. And it just is what it is. I don't think it's all that exciting. Maybe if we get more shield synergy in the future, that could be really cool. Now, this brings us to the D tier. Well, you know what? Hold up. I got one more. No, I'm just kidding. The D tier. We're going to go to the D tier. The tier of Arbin. You know, look, I can either heal a bunch of allies and maybe heal them for like, I don't know, 2,000 each. I could do like 8,000 total healing. Maybe if you double it, let's call it 16,000 total healing. Or I could just use a Phoenix Eye and do like 30,000 damage to 5 marches. So like, what I'm trying to say is that for whatever reason, I just feel like the healing on Tier of Arbin does not scale enough. And so I can't recommend it. The Heart of Kamasi, I'm going to put it at D. I can already hear some of my Alliance members being mad about that. But the Heart of Kamasi gives an attack boost and also an onslaught boost to nearby marksman marches only. No one is actually using 3 marksman marches. Your march that's got the artifact on plus 2 others. At least I don't think most people are. If you had 3 marksman marches, I think a Heart of Kamasi could be pretty cool. I mean, look, Sindrian does a lot of normal attack damage, and with Freygar, you're critting a lot. So I think a Heart of Kamasi nearby helping your Sindrian and Freygar is really cool. But if I were bringing, 3 marksman artifacts, what would I pick? I mean, I would pick some combination of probably Rattle Spear, Viola's Bow, Shadow Blades, or even the Gold Crest. So like Heart of Kamasi is pretty low on my priority list personally. I do think that at some point down the road, however, when everybody's got, 300 million power plus, that like, hey, okay, you know, you got a lot of troops. You might run a marksman ball, all marksmen. Yeah, I think it's really good. All right. But until that time, I'm going to give it a D. I think that's doing it a disservice. I think it probably belongs in C, but I'm going to leave it here because most people don't realize that it's only benefiting other marksman marches, I think. The final one here is, I don't even remember what this is called. It's the new one for Rondale, and it summons a clone and then also gives you a 10% damage boost when you activate, I think, Cowardice. You debuff the enemy with Cowardice. The weirdness of this one is that it's just not doing what I want cavalry to be doing. I want my cavalry, when I'm flying, running around, ambushing people, to do a lot of damage really fast and then get away. And theoretically, you could use your doppelganger cloaked, not cloaked, your duplicate unit to like confuse an enemy and run a different direction. And like maybe that works. And in the meantime, you do damage. But I often find that when I'm chasing someone, I just don't know if this is going to do anything for me. I think it could be cool. Like, I'm interested in it, but I just think the ease of use is not there. The ease of use of a Sorlin's Blade, a Kingslayer, the Shadow Blades, it's like, boom, you got them. And I don't know if you can get them in the same way with this item over here. Damn it, I gotta look up the name. What is this thing called? Oath of the Storm Peak. There it is. I think this has like really cool potential if you're really, really good at micromanagement. I just think most people aren't. Most people aren't that good. And that might even include me. So, cool idea, but I just don't think it quite gets there. I do think, you know, Rampage, it's, you know, 10% damage dealt for 10 seconds, I believe, when you max out that skill is pretty good. So when your Legion inflicts Cowardice, you gain Rampage. Pretty cool. I don't think I can get away with it with the Storm Peak. I do think that there will be people that do cool stuff with it. I'm sure of it, but I'm a simple man. I just want my damage. Okay. I just want to deal some damage and call it a day. And that's why I use the artifacts I use. So to sort of put my money where my mouth is, and don't mind the war pets at the moment because those are not quite the right ones. I'm just leveling them up. I've got my Infernal Flame on Lilia. For my other Mage March, I'm using Waldir as the primary. I've got my Breath of Gigantus. Very nice. For my Marksman, I've got my Gold Crest on Sindrian with Freygar. I spent so much to get it. I'm committed to using it. I should probably just use Shadow Blades, though, with the amount of times I've struggled to actually fire off the trigger on this. The Rattle Spears on Nico and Kanara, that thing slaps. It's really, really good. However, when you have heroes that do defense breaks, needs to be Nico, or talents from Kanara, or the Awakening on Kanara. Very, very good. Once you have that. Until you have that, it's good, but not crazy. You may as well just use Shadow Blades, honestly. But when you do have that defense break, oh, so good. And then for my cavalry, I've got my Spring Blades over here. And because I need the speed on my Thea, I've got the Sorlin's Blade. So there you have it. The artifacts that I'm using, the artifacts that I think are the very best. I'll jump back to the list. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. I'll be going over some of the best commanders in the game or heroes in the game soon as well, because there's a lot to talk about. So be on the lookout for that video. I've also got some pet videos that have been, I think, super informative. I've got more specific guides coming out really soon. So subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to see one of those pet videos, card will be in the end screen in just a second. I hope you'll check it out.